Hi everyone, welcome to today's edition of the research seminar. With us we have today Uros from Onocoy, who is going to talk about mint and burn, the dynamic token policies for rewarding and incentivizing participants. And we are very happy to have him have a presentation today and then a discussion afterwards. Without further ado, I think we could start directly handing over to Uros, and if you want, you can start.
Okay, cool. Let me just. Sorry, I just chose the wrong presentation to share. Okay, so do you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me full screen and give myself a laser pointer. Yay. All right, cool. So, well, welcome. Going to talk to you guys today about this Burn and Mint, some novel work in Burn and Mint, and I will. It's a little technical, this talk, I think, and hopefully it's enjoyable for you. So, let me go through the overview. Firstly, I'll introduce Burn and Mint equilibrium, or BME. I'll then talk about the problems or the perceived problems that are associated with BME, and then introduce also this other improvement on BME, which is deflationary Burn and Mint, and sometimes gets confused with BME, perhaps. Then I will talk about modeling BME as a full information dynamic game in which all participants basically have all information available to them, and how that can be used then to value the Burn and Mint economy. And then I will talk about the necessity of having deflation in Burn and Mint and why that's why that's important. And then also finally, I'll talk about how you should choose rewards and how you should actually target rewards that are fixed in the numeraire of the contributor, because that's what they pay their bills in. So to begin, I'd like to just introduce our project, Onocoy, to contextualize this work. So what is Onocoy? Onocoy is bringing high precision positioning to the masses using Web3. What is high precision positioning? Well, it's an improvement, an augmentation of ordinary positioning, which uses global navigation satellite systems, GNSS. And so that's like your GPS, and if you're probably familiar with GPS, you might be familiar also with other GNSS technologies such as Galileo in Europe. And high precision positioning, though, is an improvement because GNSS in real time will get you to like a meter level accuracy. If you want centimeter level, then you got to use this high precision stuff. So that's important for like precision agriculture, settlement for markets if you want better timing, autonomous vehicles as well, like drone delivery services. It would be good for drones not to have to do SLAM, like localization to figure out where they are. But to improve accuracy beyond 1 meter requires special techniques, and to do it in real time really requires this thing called RTK. And so RTK depends on ground-based reference stations to provide position offsets to whoever is nearby. So if you're like near this reference station and the reference station knows its position pretty well, then you probably know your position. We can determine your position pretty well as well. So we're building a global and dense network of these RTK stations. We are incentivizing you, people like you, to buy such a station and set it up. And we only need 100,000 of these things to cover the whole world. So we need to figure out how to fairly incentivize everyone in order to achieve our mission. And so I've already sort of alluded to why we're using Web3, but the way I like to explain what we're doing is the reason why we're doing all of this and why tokenomics is important is that there's really two ways if you're thinking about getting a station for yourself or getting better positioning for yourself, there's really two ways to set it up. So currently, so there's the local way and then the centralized way. The local way is you set up your own station, and then around near that station, you've got, high precision positioning. So then you would think, okay, so a good business model might be to just set it up and cover large areas with it, and then provide this as a service. Such services do exist, but they are not global, and they're not very dense in many places. So why? Because the maintenance costs are just large. If you do this as a centralized entity, your maintenance costs are large. As a local local, if you're pursuing this local model, the maintenance costs are actually negligible. So enter Web3. We scale that local model. We keep costs down on the supply side, and that way we can have a chance at covering the world. But also what we do is by decreasing these maintenance costs across the entire economy, we're basically making things cheaper for everybody. So for some reason, I can't switch slides. So let me then talk to you about a little bit about Onocoy governance and tokenomics. So again, trying to link what we do with tokenomics. So Onocoy is really in our language of us tokenomicists, Onocoy is a DAO of GNSS stakeholders. And legally, we've been set up as a Swiss nonprofit association. And according to our bylaws, which we've constructed, one must own the Ono token to be part of this association. And this entry fee is set through a governance mechanism. Currently, it's just one Ono that you need to own. The governance itself, my point here really is that just owning one Ono isn't going to give value to the Ono token. You like imagine owning a stock certificate, but you can't get any money from it, because it's not linked to the firm's bank account somehow. You have ownership of the stock certificate, but that doesn't mean you own the rights to the cash flow that's coming into the firm. So basically, my point is that the token must be somehow tied to utility, and I'm probably speaking to the choir here, but it bears repeating. So at Onocoy, the way we've done this is by implementing what is called a deflationary burn and mint scheme. And we require the token to access our services. What you do is, apart from owning an Ono to basically be part of the DAO, if you own an Ono, then you can buy a Koi. So a Koi is a direct credit that has a one-to-one exchange rate with the US dollar, but the US dollar can't be directly used to pay for the data that the high precision positioning data that we provide to our customers. You have to pay for that in Koi. So basically, that's the main component of how, this is where the talk starts really. And the deflationary component of deflationary burn and mint is that the issuance of the new tokens is deflationary, so it decreases every time period, so just like Bitcoin and halving. So let's get right into it. So what is burn and mint equilibrium? So BME is a tokenomic model that requires payment in the system currency. So in burn and mint, you basically, for providing some service, in our case, you're providing us data, real physical data. We give you a token and we mint it out of nothing. And then if somebody wants to use this data, they have to pay us. And in direct credits, like I said, and to get those direct credits, they have to use Onos, or the token. And that token, once it gets swapped between the direct credit and our token, it gets burned. So into nothing, basically, it just ceases to exist. That's the burn and mint equilibrium model. Onocoy's model is a little more complicated, but I will not be going into detail about that because it's unnecessary. So in a sense, BME is nothing really new. This concept has been around since uh, history started being recorded, and it's a way to bootstrap an economy, right? So examples are like U.S. greenbacks in the Civil War, the German Papiermark in World War I. So these are just ways to basically incentivize people to do a certain thing that they would otherwise not be doing. So it's really fiat. That's what it is. It's fiat. It's artificial, arbitrary. Why these things have to be this way? Why do you have to use Koi to pay for Onocoy data? It's might seem unfair, but it's just as unfair as the use of fiat currency, and fiat currency certainly has a use. So that's BME, but there are concerns, and to understand that, I don't always understand what the concerns are these days, but basically the opinions have been put forth, and they still persist that it's problematic. So the first article that talks about this is Kyle Samani of Multicoin Capital. 2018 has a blog post on this. And on the minting side, the problem is that you're always creating downwards price pressure. And this is really bad, of course. And market makers don't want to market make on burn and mint tokens because they think that they're just going to go to zero because of this. But burning is the opposite, right? So there's supposed to be a balance between the two. Well, they would say that the balance does not exist yet. So the token hasn't, or the economics of helium and all these other burn and mint tokens have not reached a point where the burn is anything substantial. So you're always getting minting. So that's why this work is important. And I would say that the burn in the future is just as important, or discounted is just as important as the burn today. So we'll get into that. Another concern is that burning tokens devalues holding, but that's really a problem once the burn really starts. It's like, you hold a pile of your tokens, and then when you have to actually spend them to use the service. So if you're a user, you're going to be losing tokens. Is that a problem? Possibly not. So I think what I'm saying here is that the arguments behind everything that I've talked about lack real mathematical foundation. So much of tokenomics actually does, and we need to create a rigorous grounding. And we can see this in particular for burn and mint in how Helium introduced the Helium Improvement Proposal 20, HIP 20, which introduced deflationary burn and mint. And that is a great solution. And it just seems to have, if we look at how HIP 20 is written, it's not necessarily obvious that it was introduced for the right reasons. The justification that was given was more that it was like a norm, and people are used to this thing they're used to having schedules, and it just makes Helium like other tokens. To me, that argument never made sense, but it is what it is. So anyway, Onocoy basically implements a deflationary burn and mint. On the other hand, we do have justification. It's been a few years since Helium did this, and so we have justification for why we do this. Let's talk about deflationary burn and mint then. So in deflationary burn and mint, token rewards are periodically reduced according to some schedule. So I've already alluded to this. So it could be just a halving schedule. At Onocoy, what we do is we don't have every 4 years. Instead, we decrease by 16% every year, which turns out to be basically a halving every 4 years. What that does is it limits the entire max supply. So basically all the tokens that will ever be minted are limited. And that's because the sum of a strictly decreasing geometric series is bounded. So that's pre-calculus 101. Boundedness of the supply then is really important here. And we'll see why that is. But at the beginning, what it allows us to do now that we're going to get into this math, is it allows us to begin our analysis as if all the tokens have ever been minted. So that's how I started this. So I just said, look, I'm just going to forget about minting. I'm just going to let's just see a game where everybody. Actually, it took a few iterations to get here, by the way. But I said, let's just take a look at a game where you already have all a pile of tokens, and you need to figure out how many of them you need to burn to get those direct credits that you like. So are you going to burn 1 or are you going to burn 100? Because from your perspective, you are setting the price when you are burning these, when you're exchanging the tokens for USD and then exchanging them back for, sorry, when you're exchanging USD for these tokens and then when you exchange them back for direct credits. So anyway, let's get right into this problem. So this game and how it relates to burn and mint. So let's say each participant has some amount of tokens and they're playing this game. Every round, what they got to do is they have to decide. There's some revenue coming in from people who need to get some Koi tokens, and then they need to say, okay, how many tokens will I exchange for this revenue? Because I want to capture some of this revenue. If I don't put any in, if I don't exchange my Onos, then I'm a hodler and I don't get anything except from the price appreciation of the token. But if I hold on forever, then there's no, I mean, I'm not going to get anything, right? Because somebody who is, militantly holding or hodling is, you need to spend your money to be able to actually get any use out of it. So how much do you need to spend to get some of that revenue back? And the amount that you end up spending in, so I'll repeat this again if it's not clear with a diagram. And so the amount you spend is permanently burned. So you take some from your pile, you put it into the pot. A lot of other people do the same, and that's permanently burned. Now you don't have access to it anymore. But in exchange, you got a little bit of that revenue in proportion to the amount of tokens that you put in. And finally, of course, it's a full information game. We know everything about the game, how many tokens have been put in. We also know how much revenue is coming in the present stage and how much revenue will come forever and ever and ever. This is necessary to simplify the problem to the point where we can do what we are intent to do, which is to find the value of the economy. We're not looking here to sort of figure out some agent-based thing where how can I get one up on an agent through hiding some information, hiding my intentions, trying to bluff, things like that. That's not what is going to be presented at this talk. It's just the macroeconomic analysis of how to value burn and mint economy. So the question really in the end is how much should each participant burn each round? So let's see. Again, all this is repeated here, and I could repeat it again and and talk over this diagram. So basically, like I said, there's revenue from forced buyers coming in, and these are people who actually need the data, and they're basically exchanging, and they don't care about the price. They are exchanging their dollars, their hard-earned money, for data that they need. And why don't they care about the price? Because the USD get converted to tokens, in this case Ono, and the Onos immediately get converted to Koi at a 1-to-1. You just get some slippage there, perhaps, but let's say that's negligible, which it probably is. And then you get data. So So these buyers are totally price agnostic. They will buy at any price. And so then you got this guy here. And let's say he's the only holder of Onos in the world. And this basically this economy has collapsed. There's just one monopolist who owns the token and sets the price. He can set the price at any level that he likes because this USD is coming in. These people are price agnostic. He can say, okay, I'll exchange you one Ono for all your USD, really high price, or I will exchange you all my Ono for USD, really low price. It's a pretty silly game to play. But it becomes a lot more interesting once you add more participants. And then these participants then have to decide how much of their stash they should put in, because then in proportion to how much they put in, they take out some of this revenue each round. So you want to expend some gunpowder in round K, and then you want to save some of it for the remaining rounds. And this game goes on and on and on forever. And in this game, you have just this amount of tokens, and you're always drawing down. You are never going to get new tokens, no minting. It just goes down. And this is really the sub game that is being played every round. Do I sell or do I wait? So how much tokens do I allocate to selling? How many tokens do I allocate to waiting? And if I sell, this is my reward. It is the revenue that's incoming, and again multiplied by the portion of tokens that I put into the round and that will be burned. So this is my amount. This is the total amount of what everybody put in. And then if you wait, again, there's this ratio. So this is the amount that will be left over to me divided by the amount that will be left over in the entire economy or in the entire game, multiplied by the value of the economy at the next round, discounted by this discount factor gamma. Okay, so that's the game, the sub game that we're going to play. And we are going to solve this game. It's in terms of how I've constructed this, it's important to just focus on the sub game right now, but we're going to expand this and talk about how it's used in the proof that this is actually the optimal approach or rather, this is the correct approach to value the burn and mint economy. So again, we're already considering this game. So I already explained how it works, and what I've explained over there over the diagram can be written like this. So each participant is solving this optimization problem. And this basically you can never allocate more than you own. Not in this game, because there are no one's going to give you new tokens. You can't go out into borrow some tokens from the bank because there are no other tokens. Everyone just owns the whole amount is owned by all the participants, and you're not going to be borrowing from any participant. So this constraint never gets activated, which is important, right? Because what that means is that the maximum is attained at the point at which, if you take the derivative of this function, that derivative is 0. So if you do that, you get this nice equation for each participant I, and then you can sum it over all the participants and divide by n-1. That's all you need to do, and you get this expression here, and which has no there's no term here that's based on any one participant. It's a macroeconomic equation. So this is true now, and we know that, but that was just a sub game. It was just a weird game. It's like, does it actually solve the real problem that every one of these participants is trying to solve for themselves, which is the maximization over all rounds? Like, let's say we play this for n+1 rounds, and they want to solve this for all present and future time, maximize this function. The answer is yes, it does, obviously. And the way that you can prove this is via induction. And what you do then is sort of abusive terms here. Well, it is an abusive terminology, but you can define this variable v bar k plus 1. It's just this thing we've defined. And you say it satisfies this, this expression here. And so we take that as given. And then we know by the principle of optimality that this part, which is equal to this part, is equal to, you can split it up into two parts. So you say, okay, so this is just arithmetic. And then I know, I'm trying to basically improve this, this expression, because it's really complicated, to not be, to not do the optimization over from UK to UN, but just to do it over UK. And you can do that due to the principle of optimality, because this is true. And basically, I've put this term, I've replaced this term here, and now I have this new expression. And so by the previous result, because we already solved this game here, we know that this expression is equal to this. And now we also know the definition of v bar k plus 1. We know the definition of v bar k. This is again, it was defined up here. And you do some rearranging and you find an expression for v bar k, relating v bar k to v bar k plus 1. Okay, that's cool. But how do you tie this all together? So I think you possibly get the gist of where this is going, but we have made a tie between the future step and the current step, k and k plus 1, and we then prove that this is actually the case at the end when the value of the economy is obvious. It is just the revenue that's coming in at the end, because at the end what you're going to do is you're just going to dump all your tokens, right? So then you say, okay, that's what I'm going to do at the end, and I'll work my way backwards. And if you do that, you say, okay, v bar n is equal to yn, solve that game, take a step back via this expression, take a step back via the previous game, the previous results that we found. You do that, and then you got your answer for n minus 1, n minus 2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you find that the optimal allocation is basically your burn divided by the amount of tokens you have has to equal the revenue that's incoming divided by the value of the economy. So these two ratios, I call this the token ratio and the fiat ratio, have to equal each other. So that's it. This is, sort of the fundamental equation of this talk. And I'm sure it exists somewhere in the economic literature for ordinary traditional economies, but this is true for Brennan Mint. What I mean by it, I'm sure it exists. I'm sure something like that exists, but I'm just not familiar with it. So if anybody knows that, let me know, and we might be able to relate to that in future work. Relate the two in future work. So that was cool, but we missed out on the whole minting thing. So why did we go through all of that if there's no minting, right? So these are the equations that we derived. Now this is all just copy pasted from previous slides. And we now need to introduce mints. So how do mints change the dynamics? And the answer is that they do change things, but they change things in very complex ways, potentially, but maybe not. And so if you again just go back to that optimization that is being done each round, it's basically the same thing. You are still considering the amount of tokens that you're ever going to own when you do that optimization. However, you no longer can burn all your stash that is incoming. You can only burn what's currently available to you. So M bar and M are terms that are related to each other via the minting. So M bar always decreases, but it contains the information of how many tokens are going to be minted to basically replenish M, which is the amount of tokens you have in your hand. But your burn can never be greater than M, at least at first. And so, so this can lead to basically an infinite number of Nash equilibria, because you can have certain participants hitting constraints and saying, look, I got to burn all of my tokens. And then that creates, there is no closed form solution for this problem. Then you're SOL, like you're going to have to be using a computer to find basically it's a very complex problem to solve. Now, I would say, apart from being complex, it's also unnecessary, because in reality, people that are hitting against constraints when they're burning their token are probably, these amounts are small. And more importantly, this can be traded around. So if you are hitting against constraints and you really think this token is worth it so much that let's say you really think this token is worth enough for you to be owning it, you can trade around that because you will increase the value of the economy by increasing efficiency for your that hasn't been proven, but there is some arguments behind that. But you can also borrow, right? Like in an efficient economy, if this, let's say our Ono stuff really takes off, there could be somebody that lends you some Ono for you to not be hitting against your constraints. And that's what we assume. We basically assume that the market is liquid enough that these constraints never occur. And what that does is basically, again, allows us to do some nice calculus and remove this constraint, and then again solve this. Basically, the result is the same, right? Because this minimization or maximization here is the same as the previous maximization. All the terms are the same. They don't involve this M term without a bar, and all the math goes through. So basically, I've been hand waving through this argument for the last couple minutes. I can't prove that this is true, but it is an assumption that we make. So now what we do is we define this new variable called V, and we relate it to V bar through M and M bar. So we're saying the ratio of V to M is equal to the ratio of V bar to M bar. So again, this is just math. The meanings of these terms are something that we need to sort of decide on and use our intuition as to what they mean. V bar, I'll explain soon what it means, but it's related to the value of all the tokens that will ever come into existence. V is the value of the currently available tokens, the current supply on the market. So everything that has not, it's M bar minus all the stuff that is left to be minted. And so yeah, basically I just repeat this thing in what I just said in these two bullet points. And what this allows us to do then is to simplify our equations to get an evolution of value. And we say V, if you do some math and rearrange things, this is the equation to obtain V so if you know your revenue and we know how much people should optimally burn, if you solve this equation backwards in time, you will get how V evolves. V bar is even simpler. It is really literally just net present value. So you just discount V, the future value or future revenues, future cash flows, and you just and that is what V bar is. So basically, that's what I'm saying in these two slides, and now we can go into more we can, one, do simulations using these equations, but we can also do some interesting stuff and sort of try to figure out what is, how should I value the supply of all current tokens. So for example, if you're trying to invest in Ono. So sorry, I just see a question here from Chris. So all of these minting polys known to all participants at all time. So can I weaken the assumptions to a stochastic model? Well, the answer is yes. So here I say for realism, we should relax the above assumptions and consider a partial information game. This is going to be done in future work. It's just not the focus of this talk, because the focus of this talk really is how to value the economy. And it's not clear to me that you need to actually use a stochastic model to do that. Although because it would complicate things, I can see that it can it might there's value to doing that, of course. But if we go back and we talk about the constraint, there we go, we can go back. So if we talk about this constraint and hitting against this constraint, so I can see a stochastic policy introducing further uncertainties and more Nash equilibria that would be sort of difficult to analyze and get a nice closed form solution for. So that's when I say I don't see the need for doing that, I mean I don't see the need. I can't see a way to get a nice solution that is descriptive. So I've skipped over that, and I have made some arguments as to why it still makes sense to do this. So these are, but in the end, many of these arguments are really a posteriori, because we found only after we found this nice equation for net present value did we start to get confident that we were on the right track, that this thing really makes sense. It's, opens your eyes and say, oh, okay. So you're basically supposed to value a Burnham Mint economy the same way that you value any other economy, any other investment. And because that makes sense intuitively, we've sort of focused and gone down that path. So let's figure out how to value Burnham Mint. And the value of a Burnham Mint economy, it turns out, depends on a halving schedule. So that deflationary stuff rears its head again. It got put on pause for a second, but it's back. And what we do, this again, in a sense, this was discovered. Like I was just doing simulations and I was playing around with the deflationary factor to figure out what deflationary factor we should use for Onocoy. And I found that sometimes you choose one and the value of the economy collapses. Sometimes you choose another one and it stabilizes. What gives? And I'll explain what gives in a second. But that's what we see. So if I choose like a discount term of 0.9 of future cash flows are discounted by 0.9 every, in this case, every year. And the deflation for the token is the deflationary factor for the token is 95% per year, per annum. These are the results. So what happens, I'll talk through them right now. This is the net present value of the economy. So that's what the economy is valued at. And it rises at first, and you think you've got a good, stable economy, but then it ends up going down. And what happens is that people, the NPV ends up being equal to the revenue. So it's just basically what you've done is it's a monetary collapse. People, the deflation is too low, and people are just dumping their tokens. Like it's a hyperinflationary scenario. People have no reason to hold on to their tokens, and they just dump. As soon as they get a token, they just sell it and wait for the next round. And in terms of supply, obviously what this does is people are just dumping. And you get in the end that your burn rate is equal to your mint rate, which is equal to your supply rate. They're all just equal to each other. You have just collapsed your economy because you have given no reason for anybody to hold your token. Again, some questions. 5% deflation. I mean, yes, or on a basis of sorry, this I'm not able to close this chat, but yeah, on the basis of like a discrete time, I mean, deflationary factor. So the factor is 0.95, the multiplier. So if you then decrease this factor below 0.9, you get a again, let me get a laser pointer. What you get is a stable economy, and it ends up stabilizing. And the value that it stabilizes is it's very easy to calculate. So we'll show that in a second. And the supply is decreasing, but so is the burn, and the burn rate and the mint. They're all decreasing with each other, and the supply never catches up to the burn, and that's what you want. So in this case, it does catch up. You get a convergence in finite time. Here, the convergence is in infinite time, so everything's okay. But everything's actually not okay because this deflation rate, what it means, what it ends up doing, if it's lower than the prevailing, so if the deflation the deflationary factor is lower than the discount factor, what it's going to end up happening is that your token value is going to the reward is going to zero very quickly. So I say that here. I don't know why I had to wait to say that on a later slide. But basically, so if your like I said, the supply goes down slower than the mint rate, right? It never catches up to it. So basically, M dominates W. And we know that the price is equal to the value divided by the number of tokens in the economy. So basically, price multiplied by the tokens that are being rewarded is equal to the amount that is being rewarded in fiat. And so W over M goes to zero, right? And V star, I'll explain in a second what V star is, but V star is constant, so the whole thing goes to zero. And that's not good. So this is a problem. And the way to sort of analyze this, and again, we're going to stick with more math here. And the way to analyze this is to look at the dynamic equations and then say, okay, let me just look at what we want to value this economy. Let me look at the equilibrium. I want to know what the value of the economy is at equilibrium. So I assume that the inflow of the revenues is constant. So it's just Y star. What happens in the long term, again, at equilibrium? And the way to do that is to take these two equations, the one for the evolution of M and the evolution of W, and then couple them and say, okay, I know that if Y star, so if Y is constant, then V has to be constant. So I set V to V star. I set this ratio R to be just the ratio of Y over V. And then I know that the burn is supposed to be R times M. I replace that in this equation here. So then I get rid of U. And this is what the set of equations that I have now. And so R star, it becomes a question like, what does R star need to equal? And so we consider that, again, we also replace U in this equation. And this is the expression that we get. And so there's only three cases that are possible. Either M dominates W, W dominates M, or neither dominate each other, and they're both very important terms. So in case one, that's where I believe that is the case where W dominates. Then this term is zero, and your V is equal to just the revenue. So we saw that in the results. We saw that when the economy collapses, the value is just going to be the incoming revenue, because people are just going to be throwing their token away just to capture as much of revenue as is available to them. Basically, you know, the famous people paying for their paying for food in barrels of cash or something. Like you see these pictures circulating on the internet from time to time. And then case 2 is where M dominates. So you can set W to 0, which we do here, and then you've got a stable economy, and you have this nice net present value function, or a dynamic system. And here what this implies is that the value of the economy should be y divided by 1 minus discount factor. And that's basically, again, pre-calculus, just the sum of an infinite series of sum of an infinite series of discounted revenues, right? Present and future. And then the case 3 is, well, neither dominates. And what that means is we're somewhere in between. So again, summarizing these 3 cases basically tells you that it's important to deflate, because when gamma is less than gamma D, it collapses your economy. Your deflationary factor is not low enough. When your deflationary factor is low enough, you get this you've basically, out of monetary magic, you have given value to your economy, and all your investors are happy. And then there's this third term, which is gamma equals gamma D. And then you're somewhere in between, like I said before. Now let's discuss case by case. So case 1, when the rewards decrease slower than the discount factor, what it means is you get economic collapse, right? Monetary collapse. And so that's, I think I've drilled that point home at this point. Case 2 is a good case. It's just basically the value of your economy is equal to the net present value of all present and future cash flows, discounted. And the case 3 now also has it's a strange case, let's say, because the discount factor is a fudge factor, right? Like it's a full information game where everybody shares the same discount factor. Like who buys that? That's not an actual thing, right? So it varies between market participants. It's impossible to set this. At first, and if you read like my initial blog post on this work, I totally dismissed case 3. I thought that it was just silly, and there was no point in even discussing it because you're either greater than or equal, or sorry, greater than or less than, but equal to is just silly when you're talking about subjectivity. So really, based on this discussion, it seemed at that time, at the beginning when we did this work, that case 2 was really obvious choice. It was like, okay, just deflate fast enough and you're good. Just like deflate like Bitcoin does, deflate like helium does, and we're fine. But the problem is, and as I have already gone through this point, it's the reward goes to 0. So helium has identified that to their credit, or the community, helium community identified this long ago, and with HIP 20, and then they introduced this concept of net emissions to solve that. And for us at Onocoy, we are doing something quite similar, and I'll talk about that in a second. So again, we're faced with this paradox. We got monetary collapse in case 1, where we're uninteresting to investors. That's a no-go. We can't do this. It makes no sense. Not just by investors, I don't necessarily mean investors in the sense of who's going to invest in Onocoy. I mean it also in the sense of, like, you know, the people that expend their capital to switch from US dollars or whatever your numeraire is to our token. So who's going to actually buy our token? If our deflation rate is not fast enough or not good enough, then nobody. And on the other hand, we have economic collapse because we're uninteresting to the people that provide and sort of manufacture the data, right? They're not being paid enough eventually. Maybe at first they are, because you've chosen a high reward rate at the high amount of rewards at the beginning. So yes, it is super interesting. Yes, the economy is going to really grow if you print a lot of money and you give it and you put it into people's pockets. The Fed did that during the COVID crisis, and it led to quite a bit of economic activity. But if that is not sustainable, you're going to suffer the effects at a later time. Case 3, again, there's some problems here too. It's just impossible to set exactly. Like, you can't just say, okay, this is the discount rate so that everybody agrees on, and that's the prevailing discount rate. Like, maybe you could say the discount rate should be, or the deflation rate, deflation factor should be equal to whatever the discount factor is set by the Fed or something like that's, or the market-based one, that goes off of what the Fed says or something like that. But honestly, that gets a little silly. So that was the first idea. Let's have our committee do it. We have a commission actually in Onocoy that sets rewards. So we could use that commission to do this. But then the other idea, which didn't come from me, it came from the Thomas, the leader of our rewards commission, and he said we should fix this in fiat. And so I then started to do this analysis, like, what does that mean to fix in fiat? And what it means is that just like you can, when you burn, you use this price oracle that sets the exchange rate based off the market exchange to determine how many Onos should be burned for Koi. You can use that same mechanism to figure out how many Onos should be minted for the data that comes in. So it's exactly the same mechanism can be used. It's just one is the dual of the other. And the goal here then is to say, okay, I want to reward, I want to promise a reward to my contributors. I want to give them X amount of dollars per year, but I can't give it to them in fiat, because this fiat, or the USD, let's just speak in terms of USD, this USD does not exist yet, right? We haven't succeeded. We haven't created a stable economy. So for now, I have to pay you in tokens, but I will go off the exchange rate that the market believes is fair. And I will give you that many tokens that is equal to the fiat amount that I'm targeting. And so basically, I'm introducing yet another variable, which is ZD, D standing for desired. And so the amount of reward should just be ZD divided by price. And price is, the inverse of price is equal to M divided by V. So that's a new equation that now we've put into our system of equations. So here they are at the top. If you then simplify this equation, the first one, you get this new expression here. And when the revenues are constant, like, let's just do some analysis and figure out what happens when the incoming revenue is constant, then this term has to equal gamma. Why? Because, so if this term equals gamma, this cancels out with this, and you get that VK is equal to this top numerator multiplied by VK plus 1 plus YK. And then when everything is at equilibrium, VK plus 1 equals VK, and that equation then agrees. So left side agrees with right side, and so we've shown that this expression equals gamma. And so again, rearranging, doing a bunch of arithmetic, V star is equal to this expression here. So it's no longer equal to the net present value of the revenue flow. It's equal to the net present value of the net flow of money. So inflows minus outflows. And the outflows here are your desired amounts that you're paying to contributors. And the inflows are the amounts that are being paid to you for the service that you are providing to your customers. So if we go back, basically inflows have to do with this side of the economy, and then outflows have to do with this. It's really starting to look like there's this duality aspect between the two, right? And so to bring this all home and relate it to the deflation factor that was giving us so much trouble before, what we can say is let's consider how rewards, how the amount of rewards per round evolve. So basically, if we want to figure out what's WK plus 1 and how do we relate that to WK. So if you do this math, you can just say, okay, so you can take this term out, and remember that term is equal to gamma. And then, so this is gamma, and then this is WK, right? And so we found that WK plus 1 is equal to gamma of WK. So we have solved the paradox. We've threaded this needle and figured out how to set gamma D to equal gamma without doing any subjective type of approach of trying to guess at what that discount rate is. So basically we won, and we're really happy about that. So, and the way we won actually is we gave up some of the revenue. So we say, okay, we're gonna take away some future revenue. We're gonna give that up as an economy and give it to our contributors. That's what's fair, right? You have to adequately reward people to have a stable economy, because otherwise they will revolt and overthrow you. So and that's what we do, and it seems to be the right thing to do, just based on how I've set up all this these arguments during this talk. So anyway, the value of the Burnham Mint economy with fiat fixed rewards is going to be lower, right? That's what we said, but it's also going to be stable. So sorry, this second point there, the first two here are just copy pasted from another slide. There's no need to look at that. So here's some numerical simulation results for the fiat fixed case. The net present value in this case is lower because we've taken a chunk out from the net present value in order to be able to reward contributors fairly. And otherwise, everything looks pretty much very consistent with those previous results. So there's nothing really new there to see in terms of the results. It's just that the NPV has gone down a little bit because we have to share our revenues with our contributors. So I think the talk could basically end there, but I wanted to mention just one last thing, which is just like this all works in continuous time. If you guys, if you're the kind of person that hates discrete time, there are continuous time equations here. Here's how you derive all that, and what you get is this. These are the new canonical equations. They might look more beautiful to some people, but basically I've done the analysis on with discrete time and continuous time. I just felt that the discrete time analysis is a lot easier from the game theory perspective of playing these like sub games every round, instead of having to consider I don't know, continuous time stuff where realistically markets aren't really continuous time, right? Because they're fast, but they're not. People put in real money, they exchange things. That you're not thinking in terms of rates. Often it's money, real money that gets switched. So tokens for fiat. So that's why I thought the discrete time stuff made more sense. It for me at least, like I would make fewer mistakes if I followed that approach. But eventually, I was able to make it so that it agrees with the continuous time analysis as well. So that's it. Basically, three main points. Burnham Mint models require deflation. Deflation is similar to offering deflation as a Burnham Mint economy, as a tokenomic approach, is similar to how central banks offer interest rates. So they set their interest rates based on whether they want more capital to stay in the country versus to go to somebody, somewhere else. And then final thing, fiat fixed rewards are really necessary at equilibrium. Sure, at the beginning, you could jumpstart the economy without fixing your fiat rewards and doing something a little bit different, maybe overpaying your initial contributors, because in a sense, they're taking a risk. They're also, in a sense, investors. But eventually, you're going to have to move towards fiat fixed rewards. My own personal opinion here is also that eventually, if we succeed, I think you should also just move totally to fiat. You should there will be no need for the token at some point in a Burnham economy. I think it introduces this volatility that is unnecessary at some point. So once the economy is viable, you could just say, look, like I'm getting these. The token component is annoying to deal with. Why don't you just pay me in US dollars, and I take these US dollars, and a portion of them goes to my contributors, and that portion is fixed. It's fiat fixed, and well, now it's fixed because there's no more token to speak of. And but that's way down the line. I think Onocoy gets there in a few decades, as with many other projects. But that's my personal opinion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Uros, for this presentation. Very, very informative and very detailed. Appreciate the level of diligence that you put into this. Before we get to questions from the audience, I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned that you're doing this as Onocoy, is this already implemented, or is this currently a model that you're discussing? Is it something that you have tested out in practice as well? Do you have some modeling done that you can say, okay, it's going to work that way, or is this only a first theoretical step for the motivation of how you want to approach this problem?
So it's maybe the answer is all of the above, but yeah, we're implementing this for sure. Our tokenomic model is more complicated than just burn and mint. Burn and mint is a component of our overall tokenomic model. I don't have a slide here to talk about what that is. There's aspects of it which aren't, it's not really even a modification so much of burn and mint. It's that burn and mint is a component inside. We have to think about release schedules, vesting schedules of how fast tokens are given to contributors. Some of that is actually captured in this model as well. And this model, by this model, I mean the model I just presented, and it has allowed us to think through the design issues that we've had with our own tokenomic model, and it's given us some guidance of, when we talked about fiat fixed rewards, intuitively, I think it made sense, a lot of sense to Tommy. To me, coming from being sort of like a helium maxi, let's say, I thought maybe this doesn't make sense, and I had to actually prove it to myself that it does make sense, and how it's related mathematically. Like what's the link between targeting some fiat fixed rewards? Why won't that cause like inflation? It wasn't obvious to me at first. So yeah, this model is basically being tested in a modified form. It's a simplification. Just like any engineering, right? Any engineering model is going to be a simplification of the overall thing, and you're going to first do a analysis on the simplified model, and then figure out how you can how it actually applies to the real system, the more complex system.
Cool, perfect. I have another question to follow up, because on one of the last slides you mentioned that central banks are setting the interest rates with a particular target in mind, and I think you said it was the exchange rate of the economy versus versus the outside economy. So I was wondering if you also have included in your thinking other monetary regimes that would, for example, not target inflation, exchange rates, but more inflation or steering demand, or different other aspects that can be the goal of monetary regime.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was so that comment was more just to sort of help people think through of which term, like what this deflationary term means. I think people are quite comfortable in thinking about interest rates and because they know about how fiat economies work and why how interest rates play in the whole the scheme of exchange rates. But yes, we also thought about how these rates it would, like, for example, how should the rate be set to reward people fairly? And that was a very important question that we had to answer. And it seemed for a while that you can't there's no winning. It's either you run too hot or not hot enough. And then we were thinking, okay, how about we reward people a lot at the beginning, and then later on we solve that issue down the road. But I think that the Goldilocks situation with fiat fixed rewards is the best. So yeah, we are certainly our thinking is very much colored by how how real economies work.
And how stable is this equilibrium? Like if you're saying that you really have to hit a sweet spot in between two extremes, do you get to achieve this, or is this more that in theory it works, but it's in practice very difficult to balance because some of the assumptions that you make are, like in practice, have to be a little bit relaxed or are just not applying that rigorously?
Well, I think that it's if we target fiat fixed rewards, this becomes a constant. It just the relationship is fixed. It's a very rigid relationship. So that's why I mean that was the point I was trying to make. It was that if you look here, so this equation here. So we're not actually setting gamma. It's gamma just comes out. So in this equation, so we end up proving that our reward will deflate at this rate if we do a fiat fixed reward type scheme. So instead of actually having to choose our gamma d to be equal to gamma, which is impossible, it ends up just being the case. It's just mathematically. So obviously this needs to be tested, and it will be tested through as we continue to work on this problem. But I think that this relationship is quite rigid, actually. I don't think there's going to be problems with this relationship. It might be that I can see the problem really being right now that people are used to the helium type model where participants get, and it's not just helium, it's Bitcoin too, where miners are rewarded for participating in the risk of setting up. So because they set up a miner, they anticipate that they will get a higher reward if they're an early mover. So and with us, you're not getting that as much because we are trying to fix your rewards in fiat. So what we've done as a solution to that, and this has more grounding in subjectivity than some, there's no real math behind it, which is just to say, look, we're going to give you a early mover bonus right now. So it's an early mover multiplier to your rewards. So the fiat fixed rewards right now are about $200 per year. That's what we target for our Ono economy. But we're giving like a 5x multiplier on top of that for early movers, just for taking that risk and coming along with us. And because we appreciate our contributors, and without our contributors, or I keep calling them contributors, you could call them miners. Without our miners, we wouldn't be working. So we do recognize that this needs to be taken into account.
The final question before I open up to the audience: wouldn't this recursive relationship here require you to ex ante know the future demand for the token? So if you want to fix the rewards, you would you would need to know how much is coming up in the next period so that you can do this relationship? Or is it more that you say you fix the reward per demand unit?
No, it's the former, and you're right. So there's another. That's another. That aspect is less subjective. With Onocoy, the high precision GNSS market is quite. It's sorry, I'm blanking on the word, but basically the market's been around for a while, and we have the ability to sort of have pretty good insight into what our how much of the market we can capture, and of that of that amount that we capture, what we can price our data streams at, and so we have a good idea of how much our revenues are going to be, just based on previous experience, and also just lots of data that exists from the past decade or two.
Yeah, predictability, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
Yep,
cool.
yep.
Yeah, interesting. I want to. I've seen some questions coming up in the chat, but also Idris has raised a hand. So I want to open up for the public. So whoever wants to ask a question, please.
Yeah, what I was thinking about while you draw or this model. So when thinking about inflation or deflation rate in a token economy, don't you think it is more related to the growth scenarios which you are expecting instead of rewards you are giving? Because people are actually anticipating that the network growth to a certain amount, and from that network growth amount you are actually setting your inflation or deflation rate. So pegging it with rewards is a good idea. Do you think that this is the right metric to judge the inflation or deflation rate by pegging it with rewards?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question. Could you repeat it?
Yeah,
I didn't
what
really understand the relationship between growth and pegging the deflation rates to rewards.
So usually the inflation rate is set according to your expectation of network growth, how you are expecting what rate you are expecting your network to grow, and yet then you inflate your token according to that specific estimation. So when you are trying to bootstrap inflation with rewards, is it a good idea to try doing this, because you are actually trying to restrict all that speculation element in your model?
So I don't think we're doing that, if I understand your question correctly. The gamma term is the discount rate that's market based, right? So gamma D is in a fiat fixed reward. Gamma D is not even set by us. We don't actually set this thing. We just target a fiat fixed reward, and then it ends up being true that gamma D is going to equal gamma. Gamma itself is set by the market. So that's the market. Some people say the market is a perfectly discounting mechanism. I could take that as a given. That's fine with me. And this perfectly discounting mechanism has its own discount rates, right? So it probably doesn't have a fixed gamma. It probably varies through time, but you can assume that it exists. So the market is setting that. We don't assume gamma. In our modeling, we do, to figure out sort of and get an idea of how much what the net present value of our economy is, but that's just internal modeling. From a design perspective, whatever the market thinks gamma should be, we don't really care. So we just target fiat fixed rewards, and if the math that I presented here is all correct, it should be the case that rewards will deflate at the same rate that the that the price inflates. So we get constant pressure on the token rising in price, and the rewards are always deflating, and that way the fiat reward always stays fixed. So I hope that answers your question. There are some questions in the meeting chat as well that came earlier, so I'd like to maybe
just
those.
just to intercept you very briefly, because one of the questions I had relates to exactly this answer that you gave right now. So with this market discount rate that you fix here for 0.9, this and you said that the market is a discount invention machine. You basically mean that although you have heterogeneous agents, you have an aggregate discount rate that you can rely on. Is this what you're saying?
So yes, I think that's correct. So yeah, it's the market is like a perfectly discounting mechanism. So it discounts all present and future cash flows, and so that's why when like interest rates go down, stock valuations will go up, because future cash flows are going to basically be equal to present cash flows. So you're going to see tech really shine in those instances, because if a company is capable, like the main example for me, I used to work in the auto industry, is Ford versus Tesla. Ford makes much better cars than Tesla, much better electric vehicles than Tesla does. That's not up for argument. But is Ford a good investment? No, because Ford is always going to be a car company, whereas Tesla might be something different, and there's a potential for that. And so until I think this example is more, last a decade, but Tesla did grow into its valuation eventually. So that's what I meant by the market setting discount rates.
Okay, I see. But you wouldn't really worry about heterogeneous agents, right? Like that you have different settings and different demands, because every participant has a different their own individual discount rate, right? So this is not what you worry about here in this model.
I don't worry about it, because the market seems to function even though everyone has their own discount rates. Like my discount rate is much. So I'm a Bitcoiner, right? So why am I holding Bitcoin? Because I believe in the future of Bitcoin. If I were more, short, if I had a higher time preference, then I probably wouldn't be. I would probably be, I don't know, buying Gucci shoes or something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure you would. So maybe the question from the chat now, Uros.
So yeah. So can you comment on regulatory aspects? Short answer, no. I'm not the right person to do that. I'm sorry. I hope that's a good enough answer for you. If you want a better answer, which probably isn't that good, it's that, well, we do think about regulatory aspects at Onocoy, and we have tried to basically adhere to. And we are adhering to all Swiss laws. Obviously, we want to avoid being labeled as security. This has been very important to us, and we are working very hard to be able to implement our vision while not being labeled as security. This has some. The real sticking point here is whether or not staking will be allowed on our protocol. We need it for security. But it turns out that there are some issues involved with that, because it can get us labeled as a security. Hopefully that's a good answer. The next question. So in allocating the revenue between participants, have you identified situations where participants can coordinate their burning amount with other participants? If yes, how is it impacting participants that are not collaborating? Yes, this is a really cool question. I have not factored it in. I haven't specifically factored it in, but what in this simplified game theoretic way, this analysis that we've done, what it would mean is that if people are coordinating, then yeah, so maybe they act as one agent. Maybe not. Maybe it would. So there's two things that I've thought about. One is, okay, they're all coordinating. It's like this market manipulation, oligopoly, or whatever. It's just as if one agent were trying to manipulate the price. Okay, that part's simple. The part that may not be so simple is, yes, they are coordinating, but everyone has a slightly different cost function that they're trying to, or a reward function that they're trying to maximize. And how does that impact their coordination? So I have thought about that, have not done any analysis. So, but yeah, that would be that would be a direction of future research.
So basically collusion resistance in some sense, right?
Yes, right.
But speaking of which, do you have like any other requirements on the policy setting that you have here defined in mind? So, you know, for example, as collusion resistance or incentive compatibility, like everyone wants to participate, or, you know, strategy proof, whatever. Like, have you come up with some requirements that you would set first before you started thinking about this, or is this just, are you now, you know, finding out the consequences of based on the results, like the properties of the mechanism?
It's the latter. Yeah. So only now have I gotten time to start thinking about these important aspects. So we're working together with. I mean, I'm not a game theorist by training, so I need some help here. So we're working with a professor from ETH that is helping us think through these problems. Because yeah, it's incentive compatibility and all of that. They're very important questions to answer. And yeah, none of that was answered here. We were really just focused on, and from our perspective, we're trying to get investment, right? And we're trying to show that Burn and Mint has value, because you get these comments from investors and market makers, which are important participants in our economy, and they don't like what we're doing, but they don't really have an answer for why. It just is an opinion. So we have to come up with a way to analyze this from a macroeconomic standpoint in a short amount of time. So this is what the focus was on.
Interesting, but speaking of this, like, how would investors then perceive the token or the economy? Is it because if they know that there is some form of a fixed reward schedule, or like you target, you know, like this part of your economy very strongly, this would somehow imply that you have a, you know, like a fixed interest instrument that you basically that you define here, and they would treat it more like, you know, no, something like with not the high upside, but something that, you know, has potential of giving them stable revenues over time, right? Is this how they are thinking, or don't you all have to?
That's the way I would think about it as a token investor. Now, if you're investing into if you're investing into us at Onocoy at this initial stage, it's a different story, right? We're looking for seed investment, and we're giving a big discount to our net present value. So if you look at the initial NPV, it's very, like, with a discount rate of 0.9, you're looking at a current NPV that's not too far off. It's maybe just half of the NPV at steady state. So you're not going to get a lot of kick, right, that VCs are looking for. So obviously, when we talk to VCs, we're saying we're going to give you a lower token price than that because there's risk involved. Obviously, this net present value calculation assumes that everything's going to go according to plan or according to prediction, etc. So obviously, we give a risk-adjusted amount for investment purposes at this initial stage. However, what you're talking about how should, like, a token investor, once this gets up and running, how should a token investor think about investing in our token? They really should be thinking, in my opinion, the same way that they think about stocks. It's like, do I invest in Ford or do I invest in something else? It doesn't matter. It's just the net present value. It's like Ford puts most of its revenue back into paying for its production. So it's not going to be building a huge reserve of cash. You take that into account, and that you're basically, you know, you make your investment decision that way. So Does this mean that we at Onocoy should be valued? So I think you alluded to saying, okay, we're not going to be something that's such an interesting investment. Maybe eventually that's true, but right now there's just so much growth potential. This is just one aspect of our of our business, right? Like the high precision GNSS. There's all sorts of stuff that could come through so much of the work we do. I mean, who knows? Like maybe Onocoy, this stuff that I've presented is so successful, we're going to become like a tokenomics consultancy, like you guys. So I'm joking.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, no, very cool. Thank you so much for elaborating on this. I mean, the policy. So just like to get it right from my side, the policy that you are looking for is dynamic in nature, right? So like you're trying to be at each time step be able to set the right rate, so that for the next period you get the right, responses from your system participants, right? So it is nothing like a Bitcoin protocol where you would say there is a fixed prescribed release schedule that is, according to some halving mechanisms, but you would want to be able to dynamically adjust this and also very spontaneously, right? Is this correct?
Yes. I think in general it is, and that's why we have this rewards commission to sort of always. I mean, we don't meet. Our goal is to only meet max quarterly. Like we don't want to meet any sooner than that, and then reset our values. So that the economic values set them only sporadically.
Okay, and have you thought about any form of transmission mechanisms here of the policy setting? So that, I mean, you don't have perfect information. You have perfect information in your model and perfect rationality assumed, right? So this means that if you do this change, you might not end up with the reactions you were expecting to, because not everyone is going to, like be able just to handle this reaction so quickly. So yeah, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. So we have Twitter, we have Discord. These are our main transmission mechanisms at this time. I believe that they're going to continue to be. Our website should eventually be set up also to transmit this information so that it's transparent to everybody. What we've decided, but past that also, the commission isn't, it doesn't, whatever it says is not the law. The commission makes a recommendation, and then the DAO either chooses to accept or reject that recommendation. So, and through that process, we believe that the information will be transmitted in a timely, in an appropriate and timely manner.
Yeah, okay, I see. I was actually referring to the transmission mechanisms within the economy, so that when you set those rates, so that you get to the respective expected result immediately, because this is not what's going to happen, right? So there's going to be some process happening in the economy, so that when those rates are changed, you will have then your agents, maybe stepwise adapting their policy or like the maximization problems, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that similar to central banks, right? They do set their interest rates, and then there is a transmission policy in the economy that then eventually ends up to have an impact on the inflation. But it's not that you have a one-to-one relationship that, like they do this today and tomorrow you have the effect on inflation. So this was my question. So how do you make sure that this happens? And obviously one of the answers to this is to have, a very transparent communication, right? And this is also what central banks do. In some sense, they would say, we want to manage the expectations, right? So this is actually what they do. They say, we are not even telling you that we are doing this. We are telling you today what we plan to do in the next 3 or 5 months, because we already want you to update your expectations into your behavior or into your evaluation, right? And this is what brings me to this. Communication is transparent. Communication is very important. But yeah, I was just trying to ask if, because the model assumes perfect information transmission, which might not be the case in practice. How do you think about it?
I think you've summarized it quite well. It's we do think about, basically from an information transmission perspective, we haven't really thought about it from any other any other mechanisms that might be involved. We're still in the early stages, I think, with regards to this, and thus far we haven't seen it as just important, because we are trying to get this off the ground. It'll be a happy day when we need to start thinking about these things. I think when changing the reward amount will cause some sort of secondary effects that we have to start to take into account. At this point, I think there's just so much uncertainty whether or not we're going to succeed in what we're doing, that the reward amounts that we give, whether it's $200 or $500, it doesn't really move the needle, to be honest, because the money's not there yet. So once we start getting revenue in and seeing how A impacts B, then we might see some secondary effects that basically what my answer is, we need to do some experiments before we can figure out what the right approach is.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, perfect. So I don't know if there aren't any other questions from the audience. I would like to thank you for the presentation, and if you want, you can close with a comment on future avenues of research, or like the next problems that you're currently trying to investigate, or just like give a one sentence summary if you want. But in any case, thank you so much for presenting. It was very informative, and thank you again for talking us through with this high diligence to the whole model. It was very informative and very, very nice presented.
Well, thanks so much. In the future, basically, what we're going to work on is just more of the game theoretic aspects. Making this into a partial information game is important, sort of figure out how volatility plays a factor in the price movements. That's one. And on the other side, I think you've alluded to a lot of the things that need to be figured out, like, for example, incentive compatibility. This all needs to be considered, and hopefully we get there sooner rather than later. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for hosting, and yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.